Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The J Reels Podcast.
What is happening, Michael people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. We can put away the fireworks and cool off the grills for now as we say goodbye to the midsummer holiday and hello to your favorite little podcast host back on the scene after a little break to whet your appetite on all that's happening in the world of sports, as this is the J Reels Podcast with your host, J Reels. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle or even as early as last Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And yes, after a little respite, taking off for the 4th of July holiday, I hope you enjoyed it with family, friends, or even by yourself for that matter, whether you went outside in the heat, gone to the beach, pool, stayed cool, etc., because it has been rather hot here in these parts, especially if you live in the tri-state New York area. But I hope whatever it is that you had done over the past 4 days that you enjoyed it, and now I get it, it's back on the beam, back to the workplace, etc., or whatever it is that you're doing. I'm just glad that you've stopped by here to get your fix on everything that's happening in the world of sports. And I want to start off with baseball. I know there's tennis. That's a sport that people are following. I know of the very small chosen few. But with the NBA and NHL well into their offseason, and the NFL is on the horizon, people, it is coming within days. Not weeks, not months, days. I get it. We still have another almost 2 months till we get to the start of the season. But baseball is front and center. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are probably wondering, who do listen to the podcast, and you know I'm grateful for all of you guys and gals, but I'm sure you're probably wondering, considering what has happened throughout the landscape and the one team that I'm going to zero in on, and believe it or not, if anybody's thinking I am jumping up and down or going crazy or just laughing at the face of the organization known as the New York Yankees, that is not the case, because if you know me, and have followed me over the years on social media and have just paid attention to me throughout the regular season and in some cases, in most cases I should say, in the postseason, where if the Yankees make the last out and do not record the final out in a baseball season, meaning that they win a World Series, I usually save my gloating until then. But I have to say that I am actually alarmed, maybe not surprised, considering we kind of saw this even last year, and I'll go back to that in a second, but I am alarmed at this recent stretch by this Yankee team, considering that they have not won a series since Kansas City back in the middle of last month, and here we are approaching the middle of July. So it's almost a month that the Yankees have won a series, and they have lost a ton of series here. Although they did tie, they were 2-2 against Toronto last weekend. But for this Yankee team that has now stumbled, bumbled, and fumbled their way into July, and you have to wonder whether or not this team is going to make the playoffs. So that's one thing we could put aside. This isn't going to be a situation where they're going to go 82-80 the way they did last year, because remember, they didn't have Aaron Judge in the lineup for almost 2 months during that stretch. But here's where there's a little bit of a carbon copy from what we've seen last year, now that's bled into this year. Got off to a tremendous start, have played well for the most part over the first 2 months, and then they hit an abutment. Similar to last year, if you recall, when they were in Oakland, where Domingo Germán threw that perfect game in, I guess, the last week of June, and they didn't win a series until almost the end of August. And here it is now, almost a month where the Yankees have not won a series, and they go to Tampa before going to Baltimore. Now, you think maybe they'll smack the Rays around here over the next 3 days, starting tomorrow, before going to Baltimore. And the reason why I say that is because the Rays, in their own right, they got swept over the weekend and now have to have their tails between their legs. A team that is certainly underachieved, where they have done well here over the last half decade, the Rays that is, but now they're having a season where it's going backwards for them, and certainly have not played anywhere close to what they've done here over the last few years. But we all know that the Rays aren't afraid of the Yanks. They do play against them pretty well. And even though that there is a disparity between the talent and the organizations, as we know, but the Yankees will look to try to get back in the win column and try to get themselves at least a series win under their belt, because if they don't do so here over these next 3 days in Tampa, do they even come out of Baltimore alive, considering that the Orioles now have a 3-game lead in the AL East and 4 in the loss column. And the Yankees, who would have thought a month ago that this would be the case? Now, they have faced stiffer competition. They did face teams like the Braves and the Red Sox twice here, which beat them 4 out of 6, including this past weekend, where I'm sure the Yankee fan is sick of seeing Rafael Devers, including Garrett Cole, who gave up a home run to Devers there on Saturday. His 8th home run against Cole, which is astounding when you think about it. But this Yankee team that has not been able to get out of their own way, and yes, they do have some injuries with Anthony Rizzo, an older guy who is not going to make it past this year as a member of the Yankees. And we know about Giancarlo Stanton, who always seems to find his way on the IL year in and year out. But the Yankees haven't really pitched as well here. And you can only ask but so much for Aaron Judge and Juan Soto that when you have other guys that you would hope that would pick up the lineup in some way. And yes, Ben Rice did do so on Saturday with 3 home runs, the first 3-homer game by a Yankee rookie in the history of its organization. So yes, that's going back to Lou Gehrig. That's going back to Joe D, Mickey Mantle, Derek Jeter, go on down the list. And even with Rice's heroics there and a 14-4 win on Saturday, the only win over the weekend against the Red Sox, the Yankees have gotten nothing. Whether your name is Gleyber Torres, who now may be headed to the IL as he pulled a groin there on Friday night. DJ LeMahieu, coming back from his injury, has been a shell of his first 2 seasons as a member of the Pinstripes. And whether you're trying to get it from even a guy like Anthony Volpe, who's now being dropped in the lineup to 5th and is batting, 251, and certainly has not played as well as he has over the first couple of months of the season. This Yankee team, with Carlos Rodon hitting the skids and with Luis Hill falling back down to earth, this Yankee team is now trying to grasp for air here. And granted that they're going to be fine, they're going to make it into the postseason. But as of a month ago, this was a team that was 49-21. Since then, 5-15, have come back to the pack a little bit. And you really have to wonder whether or not this team is going to be built for October. Regular season, we know they're going to make it into October unless they just completely flatline here, which I'd be beyond shocked if we were to witness that. But there isn't much more I could say about this team, and even the bullpen. How about Clay Holmes Day on Friday night, where with 2 strikes and 2 outs with Yoshida at the plate, took him deep to tie the game before losing it in extras. And Clay Holmes isn't Mariano Rivera, and then again, I understand not many, if any, relief pitchers in baseball prior to and since Mariano Rivera will even come close to what he's done. But this Yankee bullpen has now sprung leaks, whether your name is Ian Hamilton or Caleb Ferguson, guys like that. And we know about Jonathan Loaizaga, who's out for the year, and Tommy Kahnle's a guy who's been there, done that, and has his moments, but in big spots. He was the one that gave up the home run there in the 10th to Ceddanne Rafaela. This Yankee team is now fallen short of what we've seen here throughout the first 70 games. And I understand you can't just bank it on what's happened here over the last 20, but it is a what have you done for me lately scenario. And with the Rays coming up, who do not fear the Yanks, as I mentioned, and then you have the Orioles after that, who knows? By this time next week, could the Yankees, who had a pretty good stead in the AL East, I get it that the Orioles were nipping at their heels and had played well in their own right, but could it be a case where the Yankees could fall as many as 5, dare I even say 6 games by the time we get to a week from today? It's quite possible, because this offense can't just be all on the backs of Juan Soto and Aaron Judge, and they're going to need contributions elsewhere. I don't know about reinforcements coming up the pike, whether it would be from the minor leagues. We know Jason Dominguez has an ab problem, so he's not going to be available for about another 6 to 7 weeks. And who knows what's going to happen with Giancarlo when he returns, or even Rizzo for that matter. I'm sure they're going to give them a boost. But this Yankee team, it's very puzzling to even try to assess what has happened here over the last 2 weeks. All right, you lose a series here, you lose a series there. All right, you have a stretch where you lose 7 of 10, but now this is 20 games, and they've only won 5 of them. Now, can they right the ship? Of course they can, and there's still plenty of baseball to be played. So by any means, I am not even digging a grave for this Yankee team, or even far from the thought of throwing dirt on them. But there are some concerns, and I understand this isn't going to be a 2023 carbon copy where they're not going to win another series until the end of August. That, I'm sure, won't happen again, but you do have to stake your claim on this team, whether or not that they're going to be built based on the fact that their starting pitching has been very good this year, but now hasn't been as steady as it has been from the start of the year. Their bullpen is now become a situation where you have to wonder whether or not they're going to be sustainable, and we know Aaron Boone loves to go to that bullpen. So, of course, their arms may be just dead by the time you get to October. And the lineup, other than the big two, and we know Judge in the postseason hasn't been Reggie Jackson circa 1977. Who knows? Now, we understand this team could get hot. This team could go on a run and go on a roll to a World Series and finally win, one that we haven't seen in 15 years. Now, of course, for yours truly, selfishly, I hope that continues. But I wouldn't count the Yankees out, despite the fact the way they played here. But there are signs that you've seen from this team that you've seen not only last year, but even the year prior. And remember, 2 years ago, they started off what? 51-18 and 61-23. And did they come away with even making a World Series appearance? No, they got swept out of the ALCS by the Houston Astros. So we understand anything can happen, and it could flick of a switch, it could just turn on a dime. Whether you're the 2019 Washington Nationals, a team that was 19-31 and won a World Series, or a team that was pretty much dead and buried, whether you're the Arizona Diamondbacks or teams like that at least went on a magical playoff run to a World Series, although they lost. But still, we understand anything can happen. But right now, I would think, despite the fact that long-term regular season, nothing to worry about, but this team does not seem to fire on all cylinders, even with guys out of the lineup and guys that maybe are in and out of that rotation and bullpen. But still, I would certainly be, as a Yankee fan, one that I wouldn't trust this team come October, despite the fact that we still have 3 more months until we get to the postseason. I just don't like what I see, because this team, as we all know, they're going to be based and graded on what they do in the 10th month of the year, not based on what they do now. And I understand I'm talking about in the moment and what they've done so far, but again, the signs. Just look back, recent track record. And yes, you could come at me and say, Jay Reels, what does 2022 and 2023 have anything to do with 2024? Well, guess what? Who's the manager? Same manager, same GM, pretty much the same players, other than Soto. I get it. And remember, Volpe was on the team last year, and he hasn't played in October at all. So he hasn't had a taste of any type of playoff atmosphere, whether it's at Yankee Stadium or on the road. So you have to take that in consideration as well. And even a guy like Carlos Rodon, who has not pitched in October in a Yankee uniform, or even Marcus Stroman for that matter. So people, there's enough to chew on to at least have me come on this microphone to say that although the Yankees certainly are going to be formidable, certainly a team that, yes, can it be reckoned with come October? Absolutely. I am not going to dismiss that or even diminish it. But do you really trust this team, especially with everything that I just mentioned? And on top of that, your manager? Keep that receipt when we get to October. So let's see what's going to take place here over the course of this week and obviously deeper into the season. Other than that, baseball has been relatively quiet. I mean, there's a few things I could touch on here. There aren't really any teams that have gotten on some hot streaks. I know the Astros have played well. I know they lost the last 2 games here over the weekend. But overall, there hasn't been a team that's jumped out at you. There hasn't been a team that's kind of crept up back into whether it be wild card or even division contention, because I feel like baseball is pretty much going to be what it is going to be throughout the rest of this summer. And as I pull up the standings here, before I get to some news and notes, it's not as if there are teams, whether it's the AL Central, and I know that the Cardinals have played well to the point where they're just 4 back in the loss, and although 5 games behind in the division, but do you really see the Cardinals as a threat to overtake the Brewers there in the Central? Same for the Twins, as they are trying to threaten the Guardians there in the same division, of course, different league. The Padres, I understand, have played well, although they lost the last 2 games over the weekend to the Diamondbacks. But the Padres, they're not going to be a threat to the Dodgers. Same for the Braves with the Phillies. So a lot of the races there, and I get it that the AL West could be fascinating now that the Astros are just 2 in the loss and 2 games behind the Mariners in the AL West. And I pretty much had buried the Astros as early as maybe, 3 weeks ago. and shame on me for doing that. But I thought maybe this was going to be an off year for the Astros. And who knows? They could certainly, as well as they played here, and although they did lose the back two over the weekend, I don't look at them, to the aforementioned Twins, I don't look at them as a team that, despite their pedigree and despite their run here over the last 7 years, that they're automatically going to be penciled in as a participant in the postseason, or even go as far as we've seen them in the past, considering their pitching woes with Jose Urquidy as well as Christian Javier out, and Josh Hader is going to be thrown into the cauldron as a closer in a big spot come postseason. Yes, we've seen him do that in the past, whether he did so for the Milwaukee Brewers a few years ago, where Freddie Freeman took him deep when Freeman was a member of the Braves in a big Game 4. But all those things have to be taken into consideration here when it comes to these races. And even with the wild card, for that matter, it's pretty much those same teams that I talked about a week ago, where who are those teams that are going to be in contention? Yes, we could talk about the Red Sox, who have played well here and now have overtaken the third spot from the Kansas City Royals, and the Royals, who have been up and down here as of late. But the Red Sox, give them credit. A lot of people thought that they had a ton of starting pitching woes, and even their lineup wasn't as long, didn't have the length, and with losing Trevor Story on top of that, and here they are at the third position in the AL wildcard mix. But when we're looking at Kansas City, when we're looking at Houston, and even to a certain degree, I'll throw them in there, although they're, 2 games under, but they're 5.5 back of the Red Sox, and I'm sure they have a ton of games with the Red Sox in play from now to the end of the season. The Rays are 5.5 back, 6 in a loss behind the Red Sox. And then in the National League, after St. Louis, Atlanta being the first spot, St. Louis and San Diego, you have Arizona, the Mets, and you want to throw in the Giants and and Pirates. They are both Giants, Pirates, that is, 3 under and 5 under 500 as presently constituted. So, and you want to throw in the Nationals too, because they also have the same record as the Reds. But for this year, this NL wildcard race, which is wide open, and I get it, it's probably going to break down to those few teams there, as I mentioned. You're not going to have much as we get into the All-Star break, which is a week from tomorrow, really a week from today. You have the game, which will be played in Texas. And I have no interest. I'll talk about that next Monday when we kind of put a lid on the quote-unquote first half of the season. But other than that, baseball hasn't really given you a lot, at least for me. And I understand the Yankees being that big story, the way they played here, getting swept by the Reds at home through the 4th of July week. Another just shocker there. And again, I do not like what I see there with the Yankees, of course, as I mentioned before. And I'm not trying to throw another jab at the Yankee fan. I know to the Rob Rosados, my father-in-law, Angel, my brother-in-law, who is a huge Yankee fan as well as the aforementioned, my guy Carlos, John Irving, all my Yankee fans in my life. That wasn't another jab, I promise. But you haven't, like I said, not much to even get into. I know Jose Miranda, who, what, where, who's this guy? Minnesota Twins, who tied a Major League record with 12 straight hits. That's the one thing that I could really pluck from the past week as far as a storyline in Major League Baseball, and he tied 3 other players who played before 1940. So I'm not going to get into who those players are. It's not as if it was Babe Ruth or Ty Cobb or Ted Williams that had that record. No, a bunch of no-names who I won't even bring up, but that just goes to show you how long that record has been. I remember Bip Roberts in the National League did that as a member of the Cincinnati Reds, but I believe that was 11 straight hits that he got and tied an NL record. But Jose Miranda, who had tied this record here over the weekend against the Astros, and kudos to him. And I understand it's a record that will be forgotten and probably already is out of the consciousness of the sports fan, including the baseball fan, but still I had to throw that in there just to give him some credit. And one last thing, and I didn't mention this last Monday, and this is my sincerest and deepest apologies and condolences to one Orlando Cepeda, who passed away at the age of 86. Was an NL MVP, Giants, Cardinals, a guy who made it into the Hall of Fame as a member of the Veterans Committee back in 1999, put up great numbers, similar to a one Tony Perez, if you want to put a comparison there between the two players. But for Cepeda, who was a big-time player there in the 60s, National League, like I mentioned, MVP in 1967, And for him, 86 years of age, thoughts, prayers, and condolences go out to the Cepeda family, Major League Baseball, Giants, Cardinals. He also played on a couple other teams before he hung up his cleats. So I failed to mention that last week, so my deepest apologies there. Now let me put on my high tops. I want to go through the NBA landscape to discuss free agency, as well as the Celtics being put up for sale. What? You know I'm going to also get into that later on, but I want to start off with what's happened in the NBA. And to me, not much of a surprise. I know you've had some players go in different directions. I know Klay Thompson was a guy that a lot of people thought was going to end up being a Warrior for life, was going to retire with the Dub Nation. That wasn't going to be the case. Seemed to be a disconnect between he, or at least his representation, and the front office, to where they had to put this weird trade where they had to get a bunch of other teams involved, but he ended up signing a 3-year, $50 million contract with the Dallas Mavericks, which I think is an upgrade as long as he remains healthy. And for Thompson, he brings that extra scorer. We talked about this during the finals and even after the finals, how the Mavericks needed another guy that was going to average anywhere between 14, 18 points a game. That wasn't going to be a guy that was just going to rely on alley-oops and dunks and transition, as we've seen throughout the course of the postseason run up until the finals that the Mavericks had in their quest for an NBA championship. And I think it's a great move, 3 years, $50 million, for Thompson to go in there with all of his experience. And we know Kyrie won a championship against the Warriors there, as we know, where Klay Thompson was a member of. But for Klay, I think this was a good move for him, a good landing spot, good organization. He'll play with Luka. Kyrie doesn't have to do too much but score, just stand behind the stripe. I'm sure Luka will find him, and all he has to do is chuck it from behind the arc. So for Thompson, good move there. And for the Warriors, I know you're breaking up these Splash Brothers. I know that was the dynamic duo there, one of the tremendous backcourts that you'll ever see in NBA history. And even for Curry to come out to say that this was the last dynasty that the NBA will probably ever see, I will even beg to differ, and I'm a hard marker when it comes to that. Dynasties to me are 3 years and beyond, not 3 and 4, not 4 and 8. And I get it. They had a great run there during that 5-year stretch where they went to 5 straight NBA finals, where they won 3 of them. And of course, the 2 being the one that they lost to the aforementioned Kyrie Irving Cleveland Cavaliers, the one I'm sure that they would love to have back. And then they lost in 2018-19 to the Kawhi Leonard-led Toronto Raptors, where KD was out, tried to come back in Game 5. We know the scenario, blew out his Achilles, went to Brooklyn, etc. So to me, although very impressive run, and one that certainly will go in the annals of NBA history, but to me, that's not a dynasty. 4 and 8, very impressive, absolutely. But is it the 3 straight that the Lakers did in 2000 through 2002, Shaq, Kobe, etc., at the beginning of the century? Was it at the end of last century for the Yankees, 98, 99, 2000, to also punctuate the 96 championship? And I get it, they had the year in between, but they did win 3 straight to close out the century as the team of the century, as we all know. Not that. Or let's even go back. The Islanders of the 80s, 80 through 83, they won 19 straight playoff series, 4 straight Stanley Cups. That's a dynasty. The 60s Celtics, where they won 8 straight, starting from 59 to 66. That's a dynasty. The Montreal Canadiens, from the late 50s, 56 to 60, 5 straight. That's a dynasty. You want to throw in Steelers 4 and 6 years? I know they want to call that a dynasty. To me, that's not. I understand that hasn't been done in NFL history. I get in that regard. Maybe they want to call that a dynasty, and this is coming from a Steeler fan. But that, to me, is not a true dynasty. Or you want to throw in even the Edmonton Oilers after what the Islanders did from 80 to 83. The Oilers won 5 cups in 7 years, pretty much right after. They beat that drive for 5, the 19 straight playoff series that I mentioned, as they tried to get that 5th straight to match the Montreal Canadiens, got thwarted by the Edmonton Oilers, who won in 84, 85, 87, 88, and even 90. That's not a dynasty. You could call it that, 5 and 7. We haven't seen that in quite some time in even any sport, but in the NHL, you got to win 4 straight or 5 like the Canadiens did. And even then, the Canadiens won 4 straight prior to the Islanders won their 4 straight in the 80s, from 76 to 79. So if you're going to dub this as a dynasty, And I get it that any player, any coach, any executive in the Warrior organization, they're going to call it what they see it. Not my eyes for everything that I just mapped out. So Dynasty has to be 3 minimum in a row, and the Warriors did not do that. I know I digress from the whole player procurement and free agency here, so let's get back to that. You also had DeMar DeRozan, another big free agent fish out there in the ocean. Sacramento, 3 years, $74 million. Does that automatically make Sacramento a threat in the West? Not to say they're going to be a top seed, but considering that they do have De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, Keegan Murray, now you bring in DeRozan, 15-year vet, been around the block, Raptors, Spurs, and with Chicago, the Bulls, very good two-way player, a guy that I would think could maybe put the Kings up a little bit higher. Now, mind you, 2 years ago, they were a 3 seed in the West, and we saw them lose in the opening round to the Warriors. Can they get back to that 3 seed? Can they get back to maybe getting themselves closer to the top or near the top of the Western Conference? I think they can, but I don't know if they're going to be that much of a threat to teams like Denver, OKC, Minnesota. Who knows what's going to happen here with the Lakers? I think they won't be anywhere close to that top 4, or even the Clippers for that matter. We know Paul George is now in Philadelphia. So maybe they could be a top 4 team out in the West. And I could certainly see that. I don't know if they're going to be that because the West, also Dallas, got to throw them in the mix. There's going to be a lot of competition there out West. And I'm sure that they're going to be teams, even Golden State for that matter, who brought in guys like, now I understand this isn't earth-shattering to say the least, guys like Kyle Anderson and even Buddy Hield. Now Hield, I think, with Anderson is almost a mashup to make up for Klay Thompson. Anderson, more of a defensive guy. Yeah, he can't put up some offensive numbers, but he's more of a glue guy coming from Minnesota. And Hield, we know he could shoot, we know he could score. So if you put those two players together, you get a poor man's version of Klay Thompson. I don't think that's going to be enough for Golden State to get themselves to the next level, but that's how competitive the West is going to be. And I don't know if Sacramento, although I think they could be a team that could get there, but I don't know if they're going to be a lock where I could say, oh yeah, Sacramento's going to be in the top 3 for sure come next season. So good pickup for them, good move for Sacramento as they bring in some veteran leadership, although he has not won a thing throughout the course of his career, but still a guy that you could certainly count on. He'll stay healthy. He'll be a guy that will contribute and maybe add a lift to a young Sacramento King that's looking to find their way there out West. And then other than that, what? You want me to get into Caleb Martin signing with the Sixers? And yes, that was a signing that I'm sure that Daryl Morey, maybe in the back of his mind, had in hand because of the success that he's had against the Celtics, especially in the postseason. So let's see what happens there. And there were even reports that I saw that he turned down Caleb Martin, a 5-year, $65 million deal with the Heat. So that's a surprise. Twice the money, an extra year, and he turned that down to go to Philadelphia. I think maybe he wanted to start in Philly. I don't know if he was going to start right away with the Heat. So, and you have to wonder what the Heat are going to do here, because I would think with everybody making moves and Miami pretty much staying put, what do? Bam Adebayo, they re-upped him for 3 more years for an extension. But besides that, they have done nothing. And you know Pat Riley's in the lab right now trying to concoct some sort of trade to bring whomever it may be. Damian Lillard, dare I say? I don't think that's going to be the case because he's going to be owed in upwards of $60 million. And I don't know if the Heat are going to be ready to do that. So we'll have to wait and see what he's going to do this offseason. I don't know. Does he bring in Julius Randle? Doesn't seem to be a Heat guy. And I've talked about that even a couple weeks ago. I don't know if Randle's going to be a good fit with the Villanova 4 that are there already. Now, I understand if Randle's healthy and if he's going to be all in, especially with the way the team is constructed, I'm sure he's going to be a viable asset to that team. But we all know that once he gets the ball stops with him. He's going to go ISO. He's going to try to create and do his thing and maybe not be as more team-oriented with guys like Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, Dante DiVincenzo, even OG Anunoby, etc. So just putting that out there one other time just to see what maybe Pat Riley is going to do here in Miami, because you know he's probably going to have something, a rabbit that he's going to pull out of his hat before we get deeper into the summer. But everything else, and speaking of the Knicks, Isaiah Hartenstein, that's a big loss if you ask me. 3 years, $87 million. No, he is not Bill Russell. No, he is not a guy that you're certainly going to shed tears if you're a Knicks fan, but talk about a glue guy. He's a guy that certainly We saw it throughout this postseason. I get it, in Game 7 against the Pacers, scored 0 points, but he does bring defense. He's a 50-50 guy, going for loose balls, rebounds, an intangible guy. That's a guy that the Knicks are going to lose, although Anunoby is a better guy defensively and offensively, so that's going to be the one that you're going to bank on if you're a Knicks fan. But Hartenstein, a guy that's in the middle, rim protector, etc., to me, not a huge loss, but it is a significant loss for a Knicks team that, of course, is trying to get to bigger heights there in the East. And speaking of those big heights, I'm going to segue right into it with these two guys. Derek White, Jason Tatum, no surprise there as the full team is intact. They'll be back. We know about Kristaps Porzingis. He's not probably going to come back until December as he had to get surgery from that weird injury that he suffered in Game 2 of the Finals. So with Drew Holiday, who got his extension, Jaylen Brown, we know last year got his extension, Jason Tatum, now the richest contract in NBA history, 5 years, $314 million. So now with your starting five back, and you also have Luke Cornett, as well as Xavier Tillman, and guys like that, and you pretty much would have the same team coming back. Wyc Grousbeck and Stephen Pagliuca, the head honchos, the guys that run the team, known as the world champion Boston Celtics, are now put up for sale? Where did this come from? All of a sudden, this team that finally got to the mountaintop after losing in 2022 and coming back from an 0-3 deficit before losing in Game 7 in the conference final last year, they pretty much breezed through the postseason to get themselves their 18th banner, and then all of a sudden they said, now we want to sell the team. Shocking, to say the least. I would think they would probably want to sit on this for a couple more years, knowing that they brought the team back together, and that will be a part of the fabric here over the next 3, 4, 5 years. But I figure with them, they're probably thinking, let's get out where the getting is good. They got the team for what, $365 million, and now it's going to be on the market for somewhere between $4 to $5 billion. And I guess that is a smart business move on their part, considering that it's not as if they're leaving the team in shambles. They're not leaving the team uncertain whether or not, they're going to sign this player, they're going to sign that player, all right, well, they got the big two, but what about the rest of the team? I'm sure that this was calculated knowing that they were planning to sell this team for quite some time. I'm sure they didn't wake up the day after they celebrated punch drunk winning that championship to where they said, you know what, let's just sell the team. I'm sure this was months, maybe even years in the making, knowing that with Brad Stevens at the helm and building the team the way they have over the last few years and now culminating in a championship, that they probably felt, hey, let's see what we can get as far as a new ownership group. We've been there, done that. We've won a couple of titles. Now they want to move on to doing something else. And I can't knock them for that, but the timing of it all was just shocking. So you know what? I guess from afar, I have to respect that. And I can't say I guess. You say that from the surface only because you think to yourself, wait a minute. Why would any owner of a sports franchise who just came off from winning and certainly have the pieces in place to win some more, that they would just say, all right, we want to sell? It does come across as a shocking decision, a shocking move as a lifelong Celtic fan. But I have to respect that. If that's what's the case, they haven't come out publicly to say, well, this is what we want to do, or they want to just go off in their yachts and ride off into the sunset. But there is one thing that I have to put as a receipt right now and put on notice, that even though the team's intact, and if they stay healthy, let's see if they can win one more. Because how I look at this team now, the way it's constructed, they have to win another to cement this run. The Celtics of the 08 championship, they weren't able to do that. As I documented, they won the championship. Remember, KG's knee in 09, and they lost in the second round. 2010, Kendrick Perkins, Game 6. Not to say that he was the big piece, but they lose a Game 7 to the Lakers. And then in 2012, they had a 3-2 series lead against Miami on the cusp of going to the finals. And then, of course, LeBron had the biggest game of his life, and they lose a Game 7. One championship during that Pierce, Garnett, and Ray Allen era. And to me, if they really want to cement this era of Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Brad Stevens as the GM and Joe Mazzulla as the coach, they have to win another one. That doesn't mean they have to win it this upcoming year or next season or the one after that. But especially with this team as they are right now with this roster, they have to win another one. And on top of all that, more importantly, whomever they sell this team to, and I know it has to go through all the other owners and has to go through the NBA to get approved, etc. 100%. But I do hope that the Grausbeck-Pagliuca group, that they have the foresight and they certainly have the awareness to know that whomever's going to buy this team, whether it is a group of more than one individual or it happens to be one individual, that this ownership has the franchise in mind to be a franchise that is going to be sustainable. Not the new owner syndrome, as I like to talk, that they're just going to come on in here, flex their muscles to show their shiny new toy that, hey, I own the famed franchise Boston Celtics, and then Brad Stevens leaves to go to another team, and then next thing you know, Jason Tatum, he doesn't get re-signed 5 years from now, and Jaylen Brown gets traded, and the team is in disarray. To the point where Pat Riley, although this will never happen, I take this from my cousin JD, which I found hysterical, but yes, watch him try to dig up Pat Riley, who will be, 85 or 88 at that time, and say, hey, can you fix my team? Because I tried to do it my way, but I realized I can't do it because the business that I was successful in doesn't translate to being successful owning an NBA franchise. So therefore, oops, I have to be accountable and raise my hand high up in the air to know that I can't run a sports team. So can you bail me out here and bring back a champion to Boston as the architect of building a championship squad? I hope that's not the case. So one more time, memo to the current Celtic ownership, please don't bring in a David Tepper, don't bring in a Matt Ishbia, don't bring in, dare I even say, a Daniel Snyder. Bring in a guy that is going to have full focus on his team and have the right pieces in place. The pieces are already there. But as far as years and decades to come, that he has the cognizance and the full awareness and even accountability to know that he could sign off on a lot of these deals, but stay away. Because the last thing I want to see is the guy that's just going to barge his way in and try to do it his way, and I know, and I'm a billionaire, and Fans like myself could see right through that. And if that's going to be the case, I will be sick to my stomach. That's what I got with the NBA. I mean, there's other moves, Donovan Mitchell, 3 years, $150 million. Do I have to get into that? Or Jonas Valanciunas sign and trade day with Washington of all teams. 3 years, $30 million. That's a bargain. That's a guy who's a very good player, good defensively, good rebounder, good guy in the paint, but he goes to the Wizards. So NBA, that's what I have there. Now let me pivot and lace up my skates to go to the NHL. You had a lot of wheeling and dealing going on there. Players with new addresses, but also players that have stayed put. I know the big ones were Steven Stamkos, and a lot of people thought that maybe he'd come back even with the Lightning cashing in on Jake Gensel, who signed a long-term deal. We talked about that last week, where they got him from a trade from the Carolina Hurricanes, and a deal where a lot of people thought they needed to upgrade their scoring, even though Stamkos, we understand, long-time Lightning from going back to the mid-2000s, I believe, maybe 2008, maybe even earlier than that off the top of my head. It eludes me, but for Stamkos, the captain, we know about his pedigree. He moves on to the Nashville Predators along with Jonathan Marchessault from the Vegas Golden Knights. So Vegas, or I should say Nashville, trying to push all their chips to the middle of the table to be a team to be reckoned with this upcoming season. So those are two guys that they are now in the mix, and even Vancouver for that matter. They had, I don't want to say addition by subtraction, where they brought in Jake DeBrusk from the Boston Bruins, landed him with a 7-year deal, and they had two players going to Boston, almost like a trade when you think about it, as Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov, two guys that actually came from Calgary in separate deals to go to Vancouver to be a part of their late season run into the postseason, which stalled there in Game 7 at home against the Edmonton Oilers. Well, now they both moved to Boston, to Beantown, to be a part of the Bruin franchise, as they also follow each other to play in the East Coast. I guess they're part of a package now that they're with their third team here over the last year plus. So we'll wait to see what's going to happen there. I know Lindholm will be an upgrade, you would think. His production dropped off precipitously last year, where he was a 60-point player a couple of years ago. Last year, only 44 points, so he's going to try to recapture some of that magic in his stick as he makes his way to Beantown. You also had Vladimir Tarasenko, who's now on his 5th team in the last 2 years. That's right. Remember last year, or you want to say 2 years ago, the 2022-2023 season, remember the Blues gets traded to the Rangers and trying to help the Rangers get to a cup, which fell short as we know. Then you had a scenario where the Tarasenko went to Ottawa before being traded to Florida and was a part of their cup run as we know. And then now signs with the Red Wings. Patrick Kane also re-ups there too. The 2 veterans there who have won cups elsewhere. So let's see if Tarasenko could bring a lot of that cup magic to the Motor City. So lesser deal, 2 years, $4 million. But Tarasenko's a guy, as we've seen here throughout the last couple of seasons, try to be that mercenary. And I guess now is going to be a mercenary there for the Red Wings. There you have also the Blackhawks making a lot of waves. Tyler Bertuzzi, also Tero Teravainen. Both of those guys, Bertuzzi from Detroit, his most recent team, and then Teravainen from Carolina. They also signed Pat Maroon, the longtime tough guy who's bounced around a lot here. Tampa, as we've seen. St. Louis won a cup in both of those stops. Lastly, with the Bruins here, over this last season via a trade in the offseason. They also bring in Alec Martinez, Craig Smith, the goalie, Laurent Brossoit. So the Blackhawks trying to make a lot of moves, as we've seen here, especially now that they have the young gun Connor Bedard, the former number 1 overall from last year. Tampa, as we talked about there with Gensel, they also traded Mikhail Sergachev. They also re-upped with Victor Hedman, 4 years, $32 million. That was a no-brainer considering they let Stamkos go to Nashville. And then you had the Islanders. You wonder about my team, and I talked about that last week and what they were going to do. They bring in Anthony Duclair. Is he an upgrade? I guess he is. But the guy's been on a million teams, has had some baggage that has been from previous teams. 4-year deal, not much. I believe it was about $14 million. But is he going to be a guy that's going to be a good second liner, that's going to add a lot of offensive punch, is a guy that you could count on? And you would think he's kept his nose clean off the ice here over the last few years. But again, is this going to be a high-risk, high-reward deal? I get it's not a ton of money. It's not as if you sign him 7 years for $56 million. But still, you have to keep it in mind as the Islanders try to go through the bargain basement or the bins to try to look for players, as opposed to going more for the Bloomingdale's Tiffany standpoint. So let's see what's going to happen there. Edmonton trying to make deals too. They lose Ryan McLeod, but they bring in Victor Arvidsson from LA to provide more offensive punch. Whether or not that's going to help on a second line, similar to what I talked about with Anthony Duclair for the Islanders. But Edmonton, as we saw there, ran out of gas. Cup final, didn't get a lot of offensive production from a lot of players there other than McDavid and Draisaitl, especially in the last 2 games. And Draisaitl didn't even score a goal in the Stanley Cup Finals. So he's a reinforcement to see whether or not that he could provide some offense for them, especially on the heels of what we saw here over the last couple of weeks in that Cup Final. Other than that, let me see what else I could dig up here. That's pretty much it as far as just the main bulk of free agents and guys who signed elsewhere. So let's see. It will die down, you would think now, but I'm sure there may be a trade or some acquisitions as we go along, but I'll keep my eyes on that. And give it up to the Kraken. They made history here over the last week as they hired Jessica Campbell to be the first woman assistant behind an NHL bench in its 100-plus year history. And she comes along with Dan Bilesma from their minor league AHL affiliate from Coachella. They coached with each other there in their minor league affiliate for the Kraken, and for Bilesma, who got the promotion back in May, and now for Campbell to also take that next step and be the first woman. Kudos to the Kraken, their organization, for making that move, and great to see. We've seen it in basketball, of course, in recent years, obviously with Becky Hammon being on the staff of Greg Popovich with the Spurs, and we've seen it a little bit with baseball, and now hopefully we'll get to see that even more, whether it's NFL, whether it's now here with hockey, baseball, etc. So great to see these landmark achievements in the sport, as women are certainly getting their fair share to be a part of a coaching staff or whether it be managerial, head coach, etc. So kudos to the Kraken and kudos to her for making the jump. And let's see how that plays out as the Kraken turn the page from their former coach, Dave Hackstall, and now Dan Bylsma, the former Cup winner there with the Penguins in the late 2000s. Now let me break out the tennis racket and go through Wimbledon as we now enter the second week. And the men's side is relatively what we would have expected, pretty much chalk. The only big guy that has been ousted to this date has been Andrei Rublev, who lost in the middle of last week. But when we look at the landscape here, you still have Novak Djokovic, you still have Jannik Sinner, Carlos Alcaraz, Daniil Medvedev. Those guys are still at the top of the leaderboard. I know it's not golf, but they're still in play, and you have some very interesting matchups coming up where you have Carlos Alcaraz and Tommy Paul. I believe that's tomorrow, so I'm certainly going to see how that's going to play out. Tommy Paul, a guy that could have some length here, stiff competition here with Alcaraz, so we'll see. Novak Djokovic will play today against Holger Rune. Rune's a guy that also laying in the weeds, a guy that could surprise people, being one of the top-ranked tennis players in the world. So let's see if Rune could give Novak a run for his money. Alexander Zverev with Taylor Fritz. That's also today. Keep that in mind. And Jannik Sinner with Daniil Medvedev. So we're going to see a lot of big names fall here over the next couple of days. So we'll see come Thursday where this will line up with the semifinal on Friday and the final come this coming Sunday. But it's the women's side that has everybody, especially the tennis fan and the diehard sports fan like myself, in a tizzy. And I hate to pick on her, and I hate to just throw cold water on the number one women's player in the world and a one Iga Swiatek, but for her brilliance, and yes, I get it that she has 5 Grand Slam wins, 4 at the French Open, and those 4 have come in the last 5 years. So give her credit. And her other win was at the U.S. Open. So she has not won an Australian, and now, here in 2024, she did not even make it into the second week at Wimbledon. And in her post-match interview, I know she did say that she was unable to adjust to the grass surface. She didn't have enough time to make those adjustments, etc. I don't want to hear it. Whether it's hard court, clay, grass, gravel, blacktop, I don't care what it is. You're a number one women's tennis player and a number one tennis player in the world for a reason. And you know Wimbledon is grass. And I understand that the turnover from the French Open, which they extended a week, dating back maybe a half decade or so, because Wimbledon used to be at the final weekend of June or that final week of June. Now it's the first week of July. So you did have some time between the French Open and Wimbledon to adjust and get yourself acclimated to a grass surface. And I understand you could practice and role play, you could do all that, and it can't replicate what you're doing from a match-in, match-out basis once you get into the heat of the tournament. But for Swiatek, who won the first set, and then follow that up with a 6-2, 6-1 after that, I mean, it just makes you shake your head. I could see if she lost a 3-set thriller or was pushed to the third set but lost 6-3 or 6-2, all right, fine. But to lose in straight sets after winning 6-3 in the opener, you have to be dumbfounded by it. At least I do. So Swiatek, she has to get that piano off her back. And who knows, maybe she'll show up at the U.S. Open and she'll win that and everything will be hunky-dory and she'll still be number one, etc. But I was just floored knowing, and we talked about this last Monday, I wanted to see her get into this week. And I think the furthest she's gone at Wimbledon is a quarterfinal. So she's never made it to a final or even a semifinal. And here it is, her time to, let's say, all right, I just came off from winning a French. Let's see, I know I have to see how I'm going to play on this surface. I don't like grass. It's not my favorite, whatever it may be, whatever excuse. Okay. But you didn't even get out of the third round. Shocking. That's all I could say about that. And she's going to have a lot to answer to this time next year to try to get over the hump to at least get to a semifinal. Let's start there before we can even talk about her getting to a final and winning it all. So I had to bring that up first. But you had a lot of other big losses. I know Aryna Sabalenka had to withdraw because of a shoulder injury. She's your number 3 player in the world. Coco Gauff lost to Emma Navarro and was searching for answers. For whatever the reason, she lost in straight sets. and she was looking toward the box where her coach is at, and she even mentioned it in the post-match, saying that she didn't have any solutions. She was trying to look for direction. She couldn't find her way there. I don't know what had gone on with Coco Gauff, but Emma Navarro certainly had her way. I believe she won 6-3, 6-4, so it wasn't dominating fashion where she won 6-love, 6-1. But still, for Gauff to say that, wondering what had happened here, and Gauff bows out and goes into the night there a couple of days ago. Actually, it was yesterday, I believe. And then you also have Madison Keys, who I understand she's ranked now, 15th, but certainly a player here at Wimbledon. She had to withdraw in the final set at 5. I mean, think about that. She couldn't even gut her way through a final set knowing that it had to get to a tiebreak. She had to go to at least, whether it be 7-5 or 7-6 with the tiebreaker going up to 10 after that. But for her, having to withdraw, and I know in tears, to know that she couldn't go any further because of a leg injury, that was one that was tough to take. And for Jasmine Paolini, who went to a French final, as we saw there last month, against the aforementioned Iga Swiatek, now she advances, and it is wide open. You also had the reigning champ last year, Marketa Vondrousova. She lost in the opening round. First time that's happened to a champ in eons. So now, what do you have left? Oh, Elena Rybakina, who I believe is 5th in the world, who now it's her tournament to lose. And as we'll recap and get to Thursday's podcast, I would think between her, Barbara Krejcikova, maybe even Yulia Putineva, who I didn't give her credit and her flowers. She was the one that beat Iga Swiatek there in that match over the weekend, to where maybe Putintseva is in play here to win a Wimbledon tournament. That we'll have to wait and see. And Emma Navarro, as I mentioned, who beat Coco Gauff, is now going to go up against Jasmine Paolini. And let's see if Navarro can make a name for herself and get to a semifinal and the final. She's currently ranked 13th in the world. Or excuse me, she's not ranked 13th. I believe she's 15th or somewhere in that vicinity. It's Yelena Ostapenko, who is going to face off against Paolini, and I believe that's today. So women's wide open. I would think Rybakina, this should be a tournament to lose, as I mentioned. But stranger things have happened. Look, last year Vondrousova won, and she came out of nowhere to win Wimbledon, and we could probably have the same fate this year at Wimbledon. So you know I'm going to have my tentacles all over that when we get to Friday, and especially next week when we recap it all as we put the third tennis Grand Slam to bed. And then finally, as I put on the helmet and shoulder pads to get into, yes, the National Football League. Because don't look now, NFL training camp is on the horizon. And no, not weeks, literally days. When I look to check out the training camp schedule and to see that the Baltimore Ravens, now these are the rookies, I get it. It's the rookies, it's not the full squad that's going to show up, which they will show up a few days after that. But you don't have to look any further than this coming Saturday, where the Ravens will have their rookies coming in. And then on the 17th is when camp opens up. And a lot of these camps will open up predominantly on the 23rd and 24th. So we still have a couple of weeks, 2 weeks from tomorrow and this coming Wednesday, where the schedule will be in full bloom when it comes to veterans, rookies, etc. But I can't believe I'm actually talking about this. And I understand it's similar to baseball when everybody talks about pitchers and catchers reporting, and it's the middle of February and you're just trying to get through the winter. And maybe in this case, for those who are trying to get through summer, they're sick of the heat. They don't want to have to deal with barbecues and hot dogs and things of that nature. But for training camp, that's going to open up here now, literally in days, and in the coming next couple of weeks, we still have a ways to go to get to an NFL season, which will raise the curtain on September 5th, which will, I believe, be, off the top of my head, 7 weeks from this coming Thursday. Now, is yours truly ready for football? Is yours truly pumped up, ready to go? Camp's opening up. The Steelers open up their camp on July 24th. And everybody at St. Vincent College in Latrobe with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields and Mike Tomlin with a new contract, and hope springs eternal, and yes, preseason, the Hall of Fame game, the 3 games of the preseason that will kick off in the middle of August as we get to the end of August and the opening night of the NFL season. where the Chiefs will host the aforementioned Baltimore Ravens, followed the next day in Sao Paulo with the Packers and Eagles, and heading into the weekend where on the 8th, the full schedule will bloom. Cowboys and Browns. The 4:25 game, Tom Brady, his first time behind the mic with, I would think, Kevin Burkhardt. And the Sunday night game, which off the top of my head, I couldn't even tell you. And Monday night, where the NFL fan, football, fantasy, gambling, everything is going to be at full peak. Everybody's going to, excuse my French, lose their shit over. Am I anticipating that as of right this second with everything that I mentioned from now until that time? Hell to the no. Not this guy. I want summer to be endless. I want the baseball season to go on to next June. I don't have to deal. I don't have to think about pumpkin lattes, sweatshirts, sweatpants, jeans, jackets, hoodies, coats, gloves, scarves, scullies, none of it. Not even hot apple cider or apple cider donuts. I don't want any of that smoke. I want to deal in the now. I want to deal, and of course, NFL is going to be here before you know it, and college football as well. But I am one that can absolutely, positively, 100% can wait. That's right, C-A-N, not apostrophe and T. I can wait for the NFL season to begin. Forget about the preseason, forget about Hall of Fame game, forget about training camp. Just wake me up on, not even September 5th. Wake me up on September the 8th when the real season will be in full bloom. Until then, don't bother me about the NFL. Now, of course, I'm going to talk about it, whatever happens, news, notes, injuries, things of that nature. You know, I'll be here to discuss it. I'm not shutting it out completely. But when it comes to football, being ready for that first snap on the center, being ready for the stadiums to be packed, and everybody's going to fill out their fantasy teams, which, not me, and get ready for week one with these spreads and all that, I could pass, and a hard pass at that, for the NFL season to begin. Let summer reign today, as I speak, on Monday, July the 8th. And sadly, I have to close the podcast with some terrible news. I know over the weekend, Minnesota Viking fourth-round pick Khyree Jackson perished in an automobile accident with two other people in the car. And as crazy as this story is, and I should pull this up, I want to be factual here, but based on what I read, that the other vehicle that was involved, which I believe was three other people, they came out alive. Now, Jackson and the other passenger, and I believe Jackson was a passenger, I believe shotgun in the car, they were pronounced dead on the scene. And the third person, I don't know if they were the driver or the one that was in the back seat, they had to be rushed to the hospital before that person perished. But for the ones that were involved in the accident, which I believe was the one, I'm going to read this here real quick. I won't go verbatim, people, so I'm not going to bore you on that. Now, this happened in Maryland, 3:14 in the morning on a Saturday. Who knows where they were coming from. And the two other guys in the car, they actually played at Florida State and Penn State. So you had Isaiah Hazel and Anthony Litton Jr., along with Jackson, died as their car, they were driving a Dodge Charger, Jackson in the passenger seat. Their car was struck by another car attempting to change lanes at a high speed, and then the Charger left the road or highway and struck multiple tree stumps. So can you imagine how that one car, who knows, drinking, speeding, trying to show off, whether clipped or hit the other car, and then that one went into multiple tree stumps and everything that I mentioned between Jackson and the other two people involved. Obviously, two didn't make it to the hospital, and the one that made it to the hospital died on the scene. Just awful news. I mean, you can't even fathom or wrap your head around that. Just a terrible story. Thoughts, prayers, condolences go out to the Jackson family. Of course, the family of Hazel Litton Jr., etc. I mean, you couldn't even... Oh, there's no words for it. Absolutely none. The kid who's just pretty much starting, and these kids starting their lives. Forget about even their careers. And for that to happen because of some senseless driver, whether drinking or not. And I hope that when they've come to their senses, that they all get the book thrown at them. One more time, thoughts, prayers, condolences go out to the Viking family, the NFL, their families for just this terrible incident, and may they all rest in peace. That'll do it, my good people. Another episode just about in the books. As always, thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you so much for carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the world of sports. If you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, and review. Don't leave your stars, write a review, as I mentioned, at the very top, whether it's on Apple, Spotify, whichever podcast platform you listen to. Also, please, people, go to my YouTube channel, at JReels. I post stuff daily, everything that's happening in sports. I also posted a vlog just yesterday. For those who are interested, please subscribe, like, leave a comment, pretty much detailing the second half. We're already into the second half of 2024, and now we have to get on the horse. It's go time, people. Whatever goals, dreams, aspirations that you had 6 months ago at the start of the year. Don't let those dreams die on the vine. Let's go. Let's get at it, people. And that's pretty much what the vlog is about. It's a quick vlog, 4.5 minutes. Come on, you could do that while you're brushing your teeth. Please, go there, at JReels. I would sincerely appreciate it. If you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or any type of whatever it is you want to do, I don't care, suggestion, do so at the following: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, The JReels Podcast, Twitter, X, JReels1, just the number, the old-fashioned way, the JReels Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA. I took the leap from corporate America to do this 5 months ago. So let's go, people. Let's get cracking. Join me. Come on board. I don't care how many people. I just want you to hop on this train because I'm not going anywhere. I will continue twice a week. I understand last week with the holiday, but I will continue to put out content, put out my thoughts, feelings, opinions, critiques, praises, etc. with nothing but fire, passion, energy, and fury, like you've come to know, with everything that I mentioned. That happens on the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JReels Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx to South Beach to South Central to South Pacific and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JReels Podcast, on the flip, baby.